In this tutorial, we will have a look how we can create uh, advanced enemy. As you can see, if we get closer, it's attacking. When we get out of attack range, the enemy just patrolling around. But when we get too much close, it's just attacking, and the direction we are going, the enemy just gonna flip and that in that direction, as you can see. And you can implement this enemy game object and to any game you can. So you can do that, and if you take a closer look, enemy just moving a little bit faster or playing the animation. If you take a closer look and on that, we're gonna take care of that as well. And I want to shout out our two Patreon members, Lexike and Rio, for taking my membership on Patreon page. And if you guys want to do that, you can go on my Patreon page and you can do that. I have a link in the description. Also, the project file link and the source code will be in the description, and also the timestamp. You can go and check that out. So without furthering delay, let's get into this topic, how we can make advanced enemy. So let's get into that. Let's go to project tab, then assets. I have it over here, boss. So I'm gonna go there, and we need to drag our sprites. So let's select the ideal one. So I have it over here. I'm not gonna select the ideal, instead I'm gonna select this work one. So let's select the first sprite and drag it into the scene view or in the hierarchy. As you can see, I'm gonna drag in top of my hierarchy so I can see all the time. So I'm going to drag it somewhere around here. So as you can see, it seems pretty small. So what we have to do, we need to make it bigger. So let's select all of them by holding down shift and move over to inspector, then make this pixel per unit to something like 16. Let's make it 16, and now scroll to the bottom and click this apply all. Now as you can see, the boss is now big, but the problem is that if you take a closer look, it seems like blurry. So what we have to do, we need to select the all of the sprite one more time by holding down shift and go over to inspector and choose this filter mode to point no filter, because this seems blurry, so that's why. So let's select point no filter, and after doing that, click on this apply button one more time. So as you can see, now it's gone, and I'm gonna name this one to something like boss enemy or giant enemy. So let's go to inspector. Let's call this one giant enemy. If I'm misspelling that, I'm really apologize for it. So I'm gonna call this giant enemy. So it's now fine. We need to make animation. Before we do, what we have to do, we're gonna move this enemy game object left and right. Before we do that, we should make our animation. Okay, so let's make the animation. So go to animation tab. If you can find the animation tab, what you have to do, you need to go to window in the top, then scroll down. You can see animation, or the shortcut key is Control 6, and also this animator tab. So I have it over here. I'm gonna drag it somewhere around here, and let's create our animation. Before you create your animation, go to a project tab, then assets, right click on assets, then create a folder and name that folder to something like animation. So we will we will place all of our animation into that folder. That's why. So it will be organized. That will be fine. So let's click on this create button. Firstly, select the boss enemy and then click on this create button in animation tab. Then let's go to assets. In there, I already have created this animation folder, as you can see. So let's open that up by double clicking on it, and I'm gonna create a subfolder. So let's right click, new folder. I'm gonna call this folder to something like giant enemy animation, giant enemy animation. And let's select that let's open up that subfolder by double clicking on it, and we have to name this animation. So this one will be the work one, you can say. So I'm gonna call this something like giant walk, giant work, something like that, and click on save. And what we have to do now, we need to hit this record button to record our animation. So let's do that. So select the enemy first, and let's go to animation. Sorry, not animation. We have to go over to this work sprite of this enemy. Let's select all of the sprite by holding down shift and just move it over to this animation tab. So if you now hit this play button, as you can see, it seems weird. So what we gonna do, we're gonna make spaces between something like 30 would be pretty fine. Okay, so if we now hit this play button, as you can see, animation is okay, but it's not good at all. So what we make sure you just hit this record button or this record rate button to capture your animation. We're gonna make a space manually, so we will move over to something like 5 5. So let's move it to, just do that manually, so the animation will be okay. So I'm gonna move it somewhere 45. We just doing it manually, so I'm gonna drag it there somewhere around here, and it's fine. Let's drag this one right over here. And now if we hit this play button, as you can see, animation is now pretty fine, but we still getting a little bit weird. I guess it's okay now, as you can see. Let's create another animation. Before we do that, let's select all of this folder by holding down shift, and now let's select all of this sprite by holding down shift and go over to inspector and do the same thing as we did for our work. So let's make this pixel per unit to 16. Let's scroll down. Let's make this filter mode to point, sorry, filter mode to point no filter. And after doing all of these things, click on this apply button. Now it's fine, and we are ready to create our next animation, which will be our attack. And we have attack, death, and attack, death, take hit, you can say. So let's do with our attack. So let's select this attack. So select the giant enemy game object one more time, and click right over here and click on create new clip. Go to animation tab and click right over here and create a new clip, and we have to name this. Let's call this one giant attack, giant attack. And let's click on this record button to record our animation. Let's select all of the sprite by holding down shift, and let's move it over to in our animation tab. And if we hit this play button, it seems pretty quite fast. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna make spaces between these animation frames. So let's move it over to somewhere 1 second, and let's put, and as you can see, it seems okay, but we have to manually do some changes. Something like we just need to make space between these animation state, which is just play around and you're gonna get hang of it. Okay, we getting, so there that would be pretty fine if you just do it manually. Let's do it 5 5, and so we should move over to this one 1 1. And sorry, if we just doing that, basically we have to make spaces between these animation states. Okay, so it's now pretty fine. Let's move it over to here, here, and here. Okay, so 55. Now if we hit this play button one more time, as you can see, the attack is now okay. So let's create our another animation, which will be death and the take hit. So let's click right over here, select the enemy game object giant, and make sure you just click on this record button to capture the animation once again. So let's create another clip, and let's call this one giant attack, something like hit or damage, you can call, or take damage. We're gonna call this one damage, giant, sorry, giant giant damage. And what we have to do, we're gonna create, so let's click on this record button to record our animation. And now let's go to take hit, and let's select all of the sprite by holding down shift, and let's move it over to this animation tab. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna move over to something like 30. And now if we hit this play button, as you can see, it's okay. You can move it something like 20. Let's move it over to 20. Okay, so this seems pretty quite good. And now let's create another animation clip, which will be our death. So let's select this giant enemy one more time. Let's create a new clip, and let's call this clip something like giant uh, death. Just do the thing as we did for all of our animation. Basically, for the first time we need to do this in the same way as we did for the first one. So let's click on save, and let's click record button to record our animation. Let's select this death one by holding down shift. Let's move it over to animation tab, and let's move it to something like something we can move it over to 150. And if we hit this play button, as you can see, it's dying. So basically, manually we have to rearrange these spaces. Basically, we should have do in 0.5. So let's do it manually too. It would be pretty fine to look our animation states. And we are doing okay. Let's do it, move it somewhere around here, and let's move this one over here, and this one goes here. Okay, so now if we hit this play button, as you can see, enemy is dying in a great way. We have the animation. Now I'm gonna hit this record button one more time to capture our animation. So we captured it, all of the animation. We have our attack, as you can see, we have our work one, as you can see, and we have damage, we have death, and it seems pretty quite good. Okay, so we mess right over, we have left 3 frames. We also need to drag it over here. So what we need, hit this record button one more time to record our animation. Let's move this frame somewhere around here. We just forgot to do it, so we need to do it in the way we have done all of those animation. Now if we hit this play button, it would be pretty fine. Okay, so now it's pretty fine. Once you are okay with your animation, make sure you just click on this record button to capture it. Now we have all of the animation tab, so I'm gonna select this animation tab. I'm gonna drag it in the bottom where it was before. I'm gonna drag it right there. And if we select this giant enemy and move over to animator tab, as you can see, we have attack, we have damage, and we have death. Okay, before we do that, let's add some components to this animation giant enemy game object. First thing, we obviously gonna add a rigid body for gravity, so let's do that. So let's click on this add component, and let's add up a rigid body 2D, and we will move to gravity scale, and let's make this gravity scale something like 3. So it's gonna fall down due to our gravity 3 times. As usual, it will fall down 3 times more. Okay, and we're gonna choose this collision detection to continuous, and we need to freeze the rotation about z-axis. Why? If we select this giant enemy and move to transform, then rotation, play around with z-axis, as you can see, it's indeed looking weirdly rotating. So that's why we're gonna set back to 0 one more time. And what we will do, we will go to our collision detection, which says continuous, and then we will go to interpolate, we will go to constraint, and we will freeze the z rotation because it's weirdly flipping. So that's why. And we're gonna add another component for collision detection, so let's do that. So let's click on this add component, and uh, let's find box collider 2D. and attach that, and make sure you just click on edit collider, and let's edit the collider as the size of our enemy game object. As you can see, okay, so it's pretty fine now. So if we hit this play button in the top, this giant enemy just gonna fall down due to our gravity, and it's gonna play the giant walk animation right away at the game start, because this giant and walk one is a default state to play our animation. As you can see, indeed, this giant enemy just gets fall down onto top of our ground. If I select this move tool right over here and move it somewhere around here, as you can see, it's indeed falling down with our gravity. And for box collider, it's just landing top of our ground, as you can see. I hope you get the idea. So I'm gonna unplay this now. And what you have to do, you need to make this giant enemy prefab, means copy of this game object. So to make it, let's go to project tab, then assets, make a prefab folder by just right clicking on it, create a folder, name that folder to something like prefab. I already have it somewhere around here. Okay, so I have it, so I'm gonna find that folder, which will be, okay, I have it over here, as you can see. So I'm gonna select the giant enemy game object, and let's drag it right there. And now if I delete from the scene view or in the hierarchy, as you can see, it's gone. So what we can do now, we're gonna go to that folder where we drag it. So over here we did. So let's find that, which is giant enemy. Sorry for the background, dogs just doing that thing. So I'm gonna select that giant enemy. Let's select that and drag it into this in view or in hierarchy. I'm gonna drag it top of my hierarchy so I can see all the time. As you can see, we have our giant enemy with all of the shape option, which we already attach rigid body and the box collider, as you can see. So I hope you get the idea. Now we need to make transition between those animation states. So let's go to animator tab and select this giant enemy. Make sure from this work we want to go to this attack animation clip. So basically, if this player game object something like right over here, so in this situation, this enemy game object should move toward basically should attack on this player game object. So that's why we need to make transition from this giant work to giant attack. To make transition, right click on giant work and make transition to giant attack, and hit this click on this arrow, go over to inspector. We're gonna untick this has exit time. As soon as player is close enough to this giant enemy game object, this giant enemy game object should attack on to our player game object right away. So that's why we just untick this has exit time. We don't wanna any delay, and we will set transition duration to 0. And if we scroll down, we need to choose a condition in which condition we want to attack. So we will set a some certain condition, or you can say parameters. So in order to do that, in animator tab you can see parameters right over here. We have layers and parameters. So just go to parameters and click on this plus icon, and we will choose this one bool, and we have to name it. So let's call this one something like attack. So this can be true or false. And we want to choose this condition. So to choose that, hit this plus icon, and we will set this attack to true. So if we set this attack parameter to true or check, it will play this attack animation clip right away. Let me show that to you. So let's hit this play button in the top, and let's have a look on that. So just wait for to compile. And now if we just check this box, this attack, as you can see, attack animation is just playing over again and again and again, as you can see. and if we uncheck, basically make this attack parameter to false, still it's just playing giant enemy attack again and again. We never going back to work, as you can see. So we also need to make transition from this attack to this work. So I'm gonna unplay this now. So to make transition, let's right click on this attack. Make sure you just auto play mode, or else it will not be saved. Make sure you just do that. So let's right click on giant attack and make transition back to work, and select this arrow, and we're gonna untick this has exit time. As soon as player is far from this enemy game object, then enemy this giant enemy game object just should patrol now, or I need to play the work animation of this giant enemy. So that's the thing, and we will set this transition duration to 0, and let's scroll down, and we need to choose a condition in which condition we want to go back. So basically we wanna set this attack parameter to false. So let's choose that. So let's hit this plus icon, and we will set this attack parameter to false. And if we set this one to false, basically unchecked, this enemy giant attack enemy will just gonna basically it's gonna play the work animation right away. So let me, because we have chosen that condition, as you can see, if attack is false, then we will move over to this giant work. So let me show that to you. So let's hit this play button one more time, and let's have a look on that. So if we set this attack parameter to false, it will play the giant work because we have chosen that condition. But if we set this one instead to true, this attack, it will play this giant attack animation clip right away. So let's have a look on that. So if I set this attack parameter to true or checked, as you can see, indeed attack animation just playing over again and again and again, as you can see. But if I set this attack parameter to false, basically unchecked, as you can see, as soon as we set it to false, it's just playing work animation, as you can see. So once the player game object far from this enemy game object, then this enemy game object should play this work animation, and it just should patrol around on top of this ground. So that's the thing. So I'm gonna unplay this, and we also need to make transition to this state and giant damage. So from any state from this work, even we are working and attacking, we want to go to this get damage or giant damage, because we're gonna take hit. If we take hit, so in that situation we need to play the damage or take hit animation clip. In order to do that, we're gonna go from any state. Even we attacking on our player game object, we should take damage, and if we take damage, then we will play the take giant damage animation clip, no matter what state we are in, even we are working or attacking. So that's why we're gonna just right click on any state and make transition to this giant damage, and let's select this and arrow. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna leave this as exit time. We're gonna check this, and exit time we're gonna choose something like one, or you can set it to any value, and we're gonna set this transition duration to 0. And what we have to do, we need to choose a condition in which condition we want to play a giant damage or take damage animation clip. So we will set a condition. So let's choose a second condition for that. So let's go to parameter one more time, and let's hit this plus icon, and for this now we will choose this trigger one, and we will call something like hit or damage. Let's call it damage instead, damage. And now we will choose that condition. So let's hit this plus icon, and we will choose this damage one. So if we just trigger this damage parameter, we should able to see that this enemy giant enemy game object will play the take damage animation clip or damage animation clip right away once we trigger this parameter. So let me show that to you. Let's hit this play button in the top, and let's have a look on that. So we should able to see once we trigger this damage parameter, this enemy game object right over here, we have this giant one. It will play the damage. So let's try to trigger this parameter, which is damage. As you can see, damage is just or taking hit, just playing over again and again. But the problem is that we are stuck in that animation. So we also need to go back to this work or attack depending upon where is the player. If the player is far away from this enemy game object, then this giant enemy game object player should play the work animation clip. But if the player is close enough, then this enemy should play this attack animation clip. So what we have to do, we need to make transition from this giant damage to this work or attack depending upon what we're doing. So let's get out of play mode, let's right click on get damage and make transition to get work giant work, as well as let's right click on damage and make transition to this attack. And what we're gonna do now over here, we will choose, so let's select this arrow for the from this damage to work. Let's go to our inspector and we're gonna leave this as exit time and we're gonna put it something like 1, because we want to play 100% animation clip. Once over here basically means 100%. So once we played 100% animation clip of this take damage of this giant enemy game object, then we will move over to this attack work animation clip right away after playing 100% animation clip of take damage or damage, just playing which is take hit damage as you seen. Sorry. And now let's select this arrow, which is the second arrow from this giant damage to attack. Let's select that and go over to inspector and we're gonna untake this as exit time because the player is close enough. So this enemy game object, this giant enemy one, should play attack animation clip right away because enemy is too much close. So that's why we just untake this as exit time, and then we're gonna set transition duration to 0. And now let's scroll down. Let's select the from this damage to work. Let's select that and we need to choose a condition. We're gonna put 0 right over here and let's scroll down. We need to choose a condition, in which condition we want to go this giant attack. So let's hit this plus icon. So the condition we want to choose, we're gonna set this attack parameter to false. False, or you can leave it something like this. So if you just leave that, it will go from this damage to this work automatically. After playing this 100% animation clip of this damage, then it will move over to this work automatically. But for the next one over here, we're gonna select this arrow. We will choose a condition, because if the player is close enough, then we're gonna set this attack parameter to true. And we do know if we set this one to true, it will play the attack animation clip right away because player is close enough. So that's why we need to play attack animation clip right away. So that's the thing. So let's select that arrow and let's go to inspector, scroll down, and for condition we're gonna choose this attack to true. And if we set this one to true, we do know that attack animation clip will be played right away. So I hope you get the idea of this. And now and also what we have to do, we need to make transition from this any state, like while we taking damage, work or attack. In that situation, what we have to do, we need to destroy our game object. Let's suppose enemy game object don't have this giant enemy game object don't have any health. So in that situation, we need to play this death animation clip no matter what we state we are currently in. Even we are walking, and if this player if this enemy game object doesn't have enough health, then it should play death animation clip right away, no matter what animation clip we are in, even we are attacking, walking, or just doing nothing. So we need to destroy this, or should play that death animation clip right away. So that's why, so we're gonna make transition from this any state. So let's right click on any state and make transition from this state, and let's select this arrow and go over to inspector and we're gonna leave this has exit time. We're gonna take that and we're gonna put exit time to 1, basically means 100%, and we will set transition duration to 0. And from this state we're not gonna make any transition to this damage, because the enemy is no more or enemy don't have enough health, so we should not play any work, attack or damage. So that's why we're not gonna make any transition from this state to any state, because the enemy is should be destroyed by now. So that's why so let's select it, and we need to choose a condition in which condition we want to play this state animation clip. So for that we're gonna choose a trigger. So let's click on, let's go to parameter, let's select, click on this plus icon, let's choose the trigger in the bottom, and let's call this one something like death. And now if we just hit this play button, so before we do that, let's select this arrow and let's choose this condition. So in our case this death, so let's choose that death. So if we trigger this death parameter, the death animation will be played right away. So let's check that out. So let's hit this play button in the top and let's have a look on that. So just let's have a look on that, and let's make sure. So now if we trigger this damage parameter first, as you can see damage plate, and after basically taking damage, and after taking damage right away it just goes to this work animation. As you can see, if I trigger this for the next time, as you can see indeed it's doing. Now if I trigger this dead parameter, as you can see dead animation played, but it's playing over again and again, so we need to stop that. So in order to stop that, what we're gonna do, let's get out of play mode. To stop that, let's go to our project tab, and then assets where we created the animation folder. So let's go over there. So we have over here, and in that animation folder we created is a folder called giant enemy animation. So let's open that up. So we have over here, so we have all of the animation we can see right over here. We have this attack, death, damage, death, and this work. So we're gonna select the damage one, sorry, let's select the first one, which is our death. So let's select that, go over to inspector, you can see loop time. For the death one, we don't want to loop, basically we don't want to play over again and again the death animation clip. So that's why we're gonna uncheck this loop time, and we're gonna do the same thing for our damage. So let's select the giant damage animation clip, let's untake this loop time, and we're gonna leave the work, because the work animation should play over again and again, because the enemy just gonna work, and also the attack. So we're gonna leave that. So I hope you get the idea of how you can just do the thing, basically how you can make animation and transition between them with some certain condition. So I hope you get the idea of it. Let's create a script for that. Let's create a script to just patrol around, and and our player game object is close enough, then this enemy should attack. So let's create a script for that. Let's go to project tab, then assets, right click on assets, right click on assets, then create C# script, name it to something like enemy or giant enemy. I already have created, I have it over here. So I'm gonna select this giant enemy game object, let's select that, and let's select that script and drag it to add component section, and now double click that to open up in Visual Studio quickly. So as you can see, by default we have start and update function. I'm gonna remove these two namespaces from the top, we don't need it for now. So what we need, we're gonna create a parameter, something like a bool parameter, which will keep track of if the player is something like over here is close enough, then this enemy should stop just patrolling around. But if our player game object is far from this sorry, if the player game object is far from this enemy game object, then this enemy game object should patrol around on this ground. So that's why, so to do so, let's go to our script. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna use a physics2d.raycast function for that. So let's go to update function over here. We want what we want to create a circle around this enemy game object, something like with attack range, and if this player game object collide with that circle, then this enemy should attack. Firstly, it should chase our player game object, and then it should attack. But once our player game object is not colliding with that circle we gonna create from this enemy game object, then this enemy game object just should patrol around on top of this ground. So let's do that. So let's go to our update function. To create a circle we have to use this physics 2d sorry, physics 2d dot overlap circle, sorry, overlap circle, and make sure you just do that and make first bracket. So this function over here, physics 2d dot overlap circle, we do know that as a first argument it will take the position from where you want to create the circle. So we want to create the circle from this enemy center position right over here, we want to create that. And the second thing, it will take the radius, how much radius you want of that circle. And the third thing, it will take the layer mask, basically which game object you want to target. So in our case we want to target this player game object, so we need to assign this player as a player layer. So before we do that, so we need those variable. So let's make this one comment by double slash, and now let's go to top of our class. So first thing, we need a position from where we want to create the circle, so it will be center position, so we can ignore that. The second thing, we need a radius, so we're gonna put, so let's make why we ignored that point from where we want to create the circle. Basically we want to create the circle from center position, so that's why we're gonna pass transform dot position means center position. So we don't need any reference of our center position, we already have transform of our. So if we just move to update, we can pass this transform dot position, basically means we just going over to this enemy, a giant enemy, then accessing this transform, then position. So we already have this, so we don't need this position from where we want to create, so that's why. So we can move to our next thing, which is our radius. So let's make a public float, let's call this one something like attack range or attack radius. So I'm gonna call it something like attack radius, and by default I'm gonna set it to something like 5f. And the third thing, we need a layer mask, basically which layer we want to target or which game object we want to target. In our case we want to target player game object. So let's make a public layer mask. Let's call this one target layer or something attack layer, so I'm gonna call it target layer, and close that up with semicolon, control s to save your code. Now let's move to unity. So we should able to see those will just gonna pop up right away underneath our giant enemy script. So the first thing will appear is that how much radius we want. So we're gonna put any number we can, but by default we have given 5, so I'm gonna leave with that. And the second thing, we need a layer mask, basically which game object we want to target. So in our case we want to target this player, so we need to assign this player as a player layer. So just wait for to compile. When it's done, do the thing one by one. It's just taking a little bit longer time. Okay, it's done now. So if we as you can see, giant enemy and attack radius we have set, or we have given by default 5, and targets layer it says nothing, so just click on that and choose player. If you don't have player right over here, what you need to do, select this player game object first, this player, go over to inspector, and the top right you can see a layer and it will be default. So just click on that and click on add layer, name the layer what you want. I already name it over here as you can see. Then go back to that game object, this basically the player, and go over to inspector and assign that layer, it will be default. So just select or assign with this player. So now I already have assigned this player as a player layer. Now let's go to giant enemy, and as a target layer it says nothing, so we're gonna choose this player. Now the circle will only gonna check for or only gonna target for this player game object. Let's go to our script now, and let's remove these two slashes. I'm gonna remove this one. So physics 2d dot overlap circle. So first thing, it will take the position for from where we want to create. So we're gonna pass this transform dot position. It's basically means current position of our enemy game object, or you can call this center position of our enemy. And the second thing, comma, and the second thing, it will take the radius. So we're gonna pass our attack radius, and the third thing, it will take the layer mark. So let's pass our target layer, and we do know as a target layer we have chosen enemy game object, so sorry, player game object. And make sure you just close that up with semicolon. So this circle, we just created the circle from center position of our enemy game object with this much of radius and target layer. So this can be true or false depending upon if the player game object is really colliding with that circle, then this right over here, this function is gonna be true, else it will be false. So let's store this into a variable whatever we get. So we're gonna put it into a collider 2d. Why? Because this will work like as a collider, so that's why. So we're gonna put it into a collider 2d variable. Sorry, we will call this one collider 2d, and let's call this one something like call info, or you can call it sorry, call, I'm really sorry, info call info, let's set equal to this. Okay, so this call info can be true or false depending upon the circle is really colliding with this player game object or not. If it's, then this right over here, this function will be true, so that's why this call info right over here gonna be true, else it will be false. And we can extract info by this call info whatever we collided with, or the circle collided with. So we can check. So we're gonna use this if. So if call info is equals to true, and make some curly brackets, means the circle is really colliding. Basically we created that circle, and the circle is really colliding with this player game object. So in that situation, what we want to chase our player game object, and we should chase player game object. Or you can leave it like this, call info, it's also basically means true, means the circle is really colliding with that player game object. For now, let's print out a message in the console. Or what we're gonna do, let's print out a message. So we're gonna type debug.log something like enemy should chase enemy should chase, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon and control S to save your code. But if the circle is not colliding with our player game object, so in that situation what we need to the enemy game object or the giant enemy should just patrol around on top of that ground. So in that situation, so we're gonna type else condition. Basically in other situation, means the circle is not colliding with that player. So in that situation, just enemy should patrol. So let's print out a message for now. So let's type debug.log, and let's say enemy patrol, or let's call this one something like patrol, and close that up with semicolon, control S to save your code. And now let's move to Unity. So we should able to see once the player is not close enough or not in that circle, then this enemy game object right over here just gonna what it's gonna do, it's gonna patrol around once it's not inside of that circle. But once in, then this enemy that should chase, basically the message just gonna pop up. But the problem is that we are not able to see the circle we just created, but we are not able to see. To see, we have to use another function for that. So let's go to our script, and let's go to bottom of our class. You can move this function anywhere you can. So I'm gonna just doing it down. And the function is that we have to type on draw gizmo selected. Make sure you just doing as I did right over here, else it's not gonna work. So this function right over here, void on draw gizmo selected, this function just draw, and this function gets called automatically by Unity, so you don't need to call it anywhere, something like that. And this function responsible for drawing our stuff that we want to draw. So we want to draw a circle. To draw that, we have to use this gizmos dot draw where sphere function, and this function right over here as the first argument will take the position from where we want to draw. So we're gonna pass transform dot position, means current position or the center position of our giant enemy, and the second thing, it will take the radius, so we're gonna pass this attack radius. And make sure you just close that up with semicolon, and we can also choose a color with what color we want to draw the circle. So we're gonna go over here. So before we draw, we're gonna choose a color. So to choose color, we have to use this gizmos dot color, and we can set equal to any color we like. So I'm gonna go with color dot red. You can just use color dot yellow, it's totally up to you. So I'm gonna choose red, and make sure you just close that out with semicolon. Control S to save your code. Now let's move to Unity. So let's have a look on that, and we can just adjust this attack radius with how much we want, and let's have a look on that. It's gonna take a few moments for compiling our script, and once it's done, take a look on that. So now, so as you can see, the circle has been drawn from center position of our giant enemy game object, and we can adjust the attack radius right over here in inspector. As you can see, we can make it we can make it big, small, it's totally up to you what you want. So I'm gonna make it something like 10 or 10, something like that. And now I'm gonna clear the console. Let's select the console in the bottom. Basically select the console and hit this play button in the top. So once we are inside this circle, we should able to see, and when we are not inside that circle, so this message just gonna pop up, says petrol, as you can see. And once we are in that circle, sorry, in that circle, so as you can see, the petrol and message just getting pop up. But once we get inside of this attack radius of this enemy game object or giant enemy, as you can see, the message says enemy should chase or enemy should attack, something like that, as you can see. So I'm gonna go out of play mode. So what we have to do inside, so once we are not inside of this circle, so in that situation this enemy should just patrol around on this ground. But once we are in, then this enemy just firstly chase, and then once it gets close enough, then this enemy should attack. So let's open up our script one more time. So over here, as you can see, once the player game object not inside that circle, we just printing out message right over here. So instead of printing out message, what we're gonna do, we're gonna patrol around. To patrol around, firstly, we're gonna use this transform dot translate function. Sorry, translate function. Make sure you just do that and make some first brackets. So this function right over here, transform dot translation translate, will take the direction in which direction you want to go. So we want to go in the left direction, as you can see, and we also gonna create a bool parameter which will keep track of which direction we are looking. So we're gonna put transform dot translate, so it will take the direction in which direction we want to go. So in this situation, we're gonna go in the left direction, so that's why we're gonna put right over here vector vector 2 dot left. Vector 2 dot left basically means -1 in the x, -1 in the x and y in the 0. So we're not gonna move in the y, and we're gonna move every single frame -1 with in the left direction, something like you can say -1. So we just moving left, as you can see. So we can put something like -1 -2 something like that. Basically we just gonna move in the left direction. And what we will do, we will multiply with this time dot delta time, basically to make frame rate independence, or else the speed will be faster and faster over time. So that's why we're gonna multiply with time dot delta time to make frame rate independence. And also let's multiply with some unit, this, so or else we're gonna go to the left direction by 1 unit every single frame. So we're gonna move, just gonna move a little bit faster. So that's why we're gonna multiply this -1 with some unit, or what, 1 to with some speed. So let's multiply with something like 3f. So instead of hard coding this, let's create a variable for this. So let's go to top of our class, and let's make sure you just making that public, so we can adjust the value right underneath our giant enemy script. So we don't need to come to this script and over again and again. That will be float. And let's call this one work speed, something like that, work speed. And by default I'm gonna set it to 3f, sorry, 3f. And now let's replace this 3f with our work speed. And make sure you just close that up with some colon. Control S to save your code now. And let's go to our script. And we should able to see that player game object, sorry, this giant enemy game object will move to the left direction with that much of speed, or with work speed as we assign it. So just wait for to compile, and when it's done, see the change. And we can adjust the speed right underneath our giant enemy script. So I'm gonna clear the console. So work speed by default we have set at 3, and we can choose any number we like. So I'm gonna set it to something like 2.5. and let's have a look. So let's hit this play button in the top, and we should able to see that this enemy game object will move to the left direction with this much of speed, which is work speed 2.5. So let's have a look on that. As you can see, we're moving to the left direction with this much of speed. But once we are over here, we still just going to the left direction, and we just stop right over here. Why? Because the this player game object is now just collided with this circle, and once we collide with this circle, we just printing out the message, and we're not moving at all. As you can see, we just only printing out message. But once it's not, we just moving. So I'm gonna unplay this now. So what we want, once the enemy is something like right over here, what we want to flip this enemy giant enemy game object to the right direction. To flip that, what we can do, we can just select this giant enemy, go over to transform, then rotation, and we can just go to this y-axis, and we can set it to something like -180. And if we set that, as you can see, indeed this enemy game object just get flipped to the right direction. So that's why, so we're gonna set back to 0. So what we have to do, we need to go to transform, and we have to use this Euler angles, it's called Euler angles. And we will go over to this y, and we will set it to -180. So it's gonna flip to the right direction. And we also gonna create a bool parameter to keep track of which direction we are looking. So let's do that. So let's go to our script, and over here we just working in the left direction. So over here we're gonna check if, so before that we're gonna create a bool parameter. So let's go to top of our class, and let's make a public. It doesn't need to be public, you can make it instead private. For explanation, I'm just gonna make this one public, sorry, public. And let's this will be bool, which can be true or false. And let's call this one something like left facing left. And by default I'm gonna set it to true, and make sure you just close that off with semicolon. So why we set this facing left parameter to true? Because as you can see, we're looking to the left direction, so that's why we created a facing left parameter, and which can be true or false. And by default we set it to true, as you can see, because we're looking to the left direction. So what we want to create something like if the enemy is something right over here, so we will create a point, and from that point we're gonna shoot out a ray, and if that ray don't collide with this ground, then we're gonna flip this game object in the right direction. So basically we want to create a ray. So to create a ray, so let's go to our script now. Over here we can do, or what else we can do, we can just go to top. Let's do inside over here. So let's do it inside over here. To create a ray, we will use this physics2d dot raycast, and this function right over here will take the position from where we want to create the ray. So we will create a point underneath our this giant enemy game object, something right over here, and if that ray don't collide with this, we're gonna shoot out in the down direction, and if that ray don't collide with this ground, then we're gonna flip this game object in the right direction. So that's the thing. So it will take as a first argument the position, and the second thing it will take the direction. So we're gonna put shoot out in the direction, and the third thing it will take the length of the array, so we can define, and the third thing it will take the layer mask, basically which what game object we want to target. So in our case this ground, so we only gonna target this ground, so we need those variables. So let's make a comment for now by double slash, and let's go to top of our class, and let's go right over here. So first thing we need a position, so make sure you just make this one public, and then transform means you can call it position, and we can call this one detect ray or detect position. So I'm going to call this one detect detect position, sorry, detect position. And the second thing we need the direction, so we're gonna down, we will do vector2 dot downs, it basically means down. So we don't need to assign it right over here, instead we can jump to third argument, which is the length of the ray. So let's make a public float, let's call this one distance or ray length. It's totally up to you what you want to call. I'm gonna call this one distance, sorry, distance. And the fourth argument it will take the layer mask, basically which layer we want to target. So let's create a public layer mask, and let's call this one target layer, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon. Sorry, we already have a name called target layer over here, so that's why we're getting an error right over here. So instead we're gonna call this one something like detect, sorry, we will call this one detect layer. So let's call this one detect layer, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon. Now let's move to Unity, and we should able to see those fields just gonna pop up right away underneath our giant enemy script. So we need to assign those variable first, and then we can do something. So just wait. Uh, so as you can see, detect position, and it says none. So let's create a detect position underneath this giant enemy game object. So let's right click on this giant enemy, and let's create an empty child game object, and we can call this one detect, sorry, detect position, detect position. And let's select this move tool right over here, and let's move it somewhere around here, and let's select an icon for that. So let's go over to inspector and click on this box, and we're gonna choose something like yellow. You can choose any color you like, or any gizmos you like. So we're gonna move it somewhere around here. So from this point we want to shoot out a ray. So let's go to our giant enemy. So I'm gonna choose distance something like 1, and for detect layer we're gonna choose ground layer. So make sure you just assign this ground as a ground layer. So how you can do that, so before we do that, so let's go to tile map. So I'm gonna go to tile map, sorry, I have it tile map. So let's go there, or the ground I guess. Actually, I don't know what I name it. Okay, so I have it over here. So this is our ground. So make sure you just assign this ground as a ground layer. To do so, we're gonna do the same thing as we did for our player game object. So select the game object first, or the ground. Go over to inspector. In the top right you can see layer, and it will be default. So just click on that and click on add layer, and name the layer what you want. I already name it over here ground, as you can see. So let's go to that ground game object one more time. Go to inspector and assign that layer which will be default to a ground. So I already have done it, as you can see. So I'm going to go to our giant enemy game object one more time, and detect layer I'm gonna choose ground. So the ray only gonna check for our ground. So I'm gonna move this detect point a little bit further away from this enemy, and of our giant enemy game object, as you can see. And make sure you just go to giant enemy and go to overrides and click on overrides and click on apply all. So whatever changes we made or whatever component we added, it will be added in the prefab of this giant enemy game object as well. Means that copy of that game object of this giant enemy. So let's click on this apply all. Now it saves. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna select this detect position. Let's drag it to detect position field. Now we have detect position. Now we can shoot out the ray from that point. So let's go to our script, and let's remove these two slashes from right over here. So the first thing, it will take the position from where we want to create. So let's pass our detect position, detect position dot position, sorry, detect position dot position. And the second thing, it will take the direction. So let's pass vector 2 dot down. So basically vector 2 dot down basically means y in x in the 0, so x in the 0, and 1 in the y in the -1. So it will be -1 which will be down. Okay, and x in the 0. So the ray will only gonna go in the down direction. So -1 in the y, so it will go down. So that's the thing. And the third argument, it will take the length of the ray or distance. So let's pass our distance or the length of the ray. And the third argument, it will take the layer mask. So we're gonna pass our check layer or detect layer. So let's pass detect layer, and we do know that as a detect layer we have chosen our ground. And make sure you just close that up with semicolon. So this function right over here, it's gonna create a ray from that detect position in the down direction with this much of length, which is distant, and it's gonna target that ground. So this ray, and let's store the ray right over here. So this can be true or false. If the ray is really colliding with this ground, so that will be true. So the function right over here gonna give us a true value, or else it will give us a false value. So let's store the value into a raycast, because this is a raycast. So that's why we have to store the result into a raycast hit 2D. So let's create a raycast hit 2D, and you can call it something like hit info or hit. So I'm going to call something like hit, and let's set equal to this. So this hit can be true or false depending upon if the ray is really colliding with this ground or not. If it's, then this ray will be true, else it will be false. So, and we can extract info whatever we collided with by going to this hit parameter. We can extract info, the name of the game object we collided with, something like the ray definitely gonna collide with this ground. So we can extract info, or extract properties of this ground, like name, tag, anything we can. So we're not gonna do that. Instead we're gonna check it in the bottom. So if hit is equals to true, true, or you can leave it like this, it's also means true, means that, and make some curly brackets, means that this ray is really colliding with this ground. So in that situation, what we're gonna do, or colliding with this ground. But if I move this giant enemy game object something right over here, so as you can see, the ray will not collide with this ground anymore at the end of this ground, as you can see in the edges, as you can see. So we're gonna check if hit equals false, means the ray is not colliding something the enemy is right over here now, because the ray will not collide with this ground, as you can see. So in that situation, what we need to do, we need to flip our character so first let's print out a message. For printing out, let's type debug.log, and let's say something like flip enemy, something like that, and let's close that off with some colon. Control S to save your code. Now let's move to Unity. So we should able to see, once the enemy is right over here, that message just gonna pop up right away. So just have a look on that. So but the problem is that we are not able to see our ray. If it would be fine if we are able to see the ray. So we're gonna use that function which we know on draw gizmo selected. So let's go right over there one more time, and let's go to this function. Let's go right over here. To draw a ray, we have to use this gizmos, and make sure you just using this function. It's called on draw gizmo selected, else you not gonna able to do that. To draw, we have to use this gizmos dot draw ray, and this function will take the position from where we want to create the ray. So we want to create the ray from detect position, so let's pass detect position dot position. And the second thing, it will take the direction, so we're going to pass vector 2 dot down, means down -1 in the y, and let's multiply this down with the length of the ray. So let's multiply distance, means the length of the ray, we assign it, and make sure you just close that off with semicolon. And before you draw the ray, make sure you just do have a point, something like if detect position dot position is empty. Basically, if we move to Unity, if you haven't dragged this detect position to this detect position field, so this corner over here will be empty, but this function right over here will still try to find that detect position dot position, and will draw the ray in the down direction, as you can see. But if you haven't assigned it, so this function is still gonna try to find that point, but we do know that if we haven't assigned it, so this one's gonna be empty. So that's why this function gonna throw us an error, because it's not gonna able to find that. So before we draw the ray, we need to check. We will check if detect position if it's equals to null. So in that situation, make some curly brackets, we need to stop drawing. Basically, if detect position is equals to none, basically this one is empty, basically none. So in that situation, we need to stop drawing the ray. So that's why we're gonna type in between these curly brackets return, and make sure you just close that up with some semicolon. So after return, whatever line of code you write, it's not gonna work. So the draw will be stop drawing. So after return, whatever line of code you write, it's not gonna able to draw, not gonna run. But we do know that we dragged this detect position to detect point field, so that's why this condition over here will get false. So that's why this gonna run, and we can choose the color of the ray. So we do not choose color, we're gonna use this gizmos dot color, and we will set equal to any color we like. So I'm gonna set equal to color dot yellow, and make sure you just close that up with some semicolon, and control S to save your code. Now let's move to Unity. So we should able to see that the draw will be ray from this position in the down direction, and we can adjust the length of the ray or the distance right over here underneath our giant enemy script. So let's have a look. So just wait for to compile. As you can see, indeed the ray has been drawn from this detect position, and its color is yellow. So I'm gonna move it somewhere right over here, and we can adjust the ray. So I'm gonna make it a little bit big, something like 1.5, And now if we hit this play button, select the console in the bottom or select the console tab, we should able to see the message just gonna pop up once the enemy at the edges of this ground, because that ray will not collide with this ground, and we do know if it's not collide, then that we just popping out that message as you can see, flip enemy. So once we are something right over here, so as you can see, the ray will not collide with this ground, so that's why we just printing out the message. So instead of printing out message, what we need to flip this character in the right direction. To flip, we do know if we set this y rotation of this enemy transform, y rotation to -180, it will flip to the right direction. So that's why. So let's go to our script. Before we flip or print out this message, we're gonna do something else. Basically, we're gonna flip our character. To flip that, before we flip that, let's create a bool parameter. Sorry, we already created a bool parameter. As you can see, facing left is true by default, so we already created. So we're gonna take this bool parameter to check. So let's go right over here. So instead of printing out message, we're gonna check if facing left, okay, if facing left is equals to true. If that is the case, then we're gonna do something else. Firstly, what we're doing, if hit is equals to false, basically means the enemy game object something right over here, okay. So that's why ray is not colliding. Basically hit is equals false, means the ray is not colliding. And the second, we checking and we checking if we looking to the left direction. As you can see, we indeed gonna look in the left direction. So what we have to do, we need to flip this character in the right direction. So let's go our script. So we're gonna go to transform dot Euler angles, and we will set equal to, sorry, new vector 3, and make first bracket and close that up with semicolon. Basically we going transform then dot Euler angles. Basically this transform dot Euler angles have three axes, which is x, y and z. So that's why we set equal to new vector 3, which has x axis, y axis and the z axis. So we do know if we just replace this y with -180f, 80f, or we show that it's flipping to the right direction. So that's why we set -180f, so it's gonna flip to the right direction. And in the x, we're gonna do we're gonna put 0f, and in the z axis we're gonna do the same thing, which is 0f. So after flipping this character to the right direction, what we need to do, we need to set this facing left parameter to false, because in that situation we will no longer gonna look in the left direction. So that's why we're gonna set this facing left parameter to false after flipping. So let's set this facing left equal to false, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon, control s to save your code. And now let's move to Unity. So we should able to see that once we are at the edge of this ground, we will look or we just flipping to the right direction. After basically flipping our character, we just setting facing left parameter to false. So if I just move this enemy game object something right over here, and let's have a look. So let's hit this play button in the top, and we should able to see we will flip our game object in the right direction. Now once the enemy is at the edge of this ground, it will flip to the right direction. And after flipping, we just setting this facing left to false, as you can see indeed. But the problem is that once we are over here, we're not flipping to the left direction anymore. So once we are something right over here, if we flip this to -180, as you can see, the ray will not collide with this ground. So in this situation, what we need to do, we need to flip this character one more time to the left direction. To flip this, we can set this y to now 0, and if we set the to 0, as you can see, we're looking to the left direction. Basically we flipping our character to left direction. So we need to and after flipping, we need to set this facing left parameter to true one more time, because as you can see, we're looking to the left direction. So that's why. So what I'm gonna do, let's go our script one more time, else we will check else let's copy this line of code by control C, else, and we're gonna paste it over here. So we're checking firstly if hit equals to false. Basically this ray is not gonna collide with this ground. So in that situation we're gonna put 0f. So we will look to the left direction one more time, and after looking we're gonna set this facing left parameter to true one more time because we're gonna look in the left direction. So that's why let's set it to true. Control S to save your code. And now let's move to Unity. So we should able to see uh, that our enemy game object will look to the left direction. So just wait for to compile. Just wait and have a look. So if I move this enemy game object right over here, now hit this play button in the top and have a look on that. So just wait for to compile, and when it's done have a look on that. So just wait for to compile, and once we are right over here, as you can see it's flipped, and once we are right over here this game object should live. So as you can see it's get flipped to the left direction, and it just patrolling around on top of this ground. As you can see, indeed it's just going left and right or patrolling. So now if I just get closer to this enemy game object or get inside of this circle, what we doing, we just printing out the message says enemy should chase or enemy should attack, something like that. So let's go there, and enemy will stop just moving left and right because we not doing anything once the call info is true. Basically the player is really colliding with this circle, we just only printing out message, and we doing and we doing nothing at all. But once the far from that circle, we just doing all of these things. As you can see right over here, we just patrolling. So let's have a look once we get inside of this circle. As you can see, enemy should chase message just getting pop up and we doing nothing. So we need to play those animations clip. So I hope you get the idea of this. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. Once we inside of this circle, basically attack radius, what we doing, we just printing out our message says enemy should chase us. So what we gonna do, once if I select this giant enemy and move it somewhere around here, and if I select my player game object right now, select this move tool and move it somewhere around here, somewhere around here. So what I want, so enemy as you can see is now in attack radius. So firstly this and sorry, this player game object, and firstly what this giant enemy should do, it should chase firstly, and then once this enemy get close enough, then it should play attack animation which we attacking. So that's the thing. So I'm gonna take my player game object one more time, I'm gonna move it somewhere around here, and now let's do, so let's open up our giant enemy script some over here. So as you can see, we just printing out the message over here. So so instead of printing out message, what we want to chase. To chase, we're gonna use this vector2 dot move towards function, and this function right over here will take current position where we are right now, and the second thing, it will take target position, basically where we want to go or what we want to chase. So in our case, player game object. And the third thing, it will take the speed, how much speed you want to go to that point or to that target position. So we need those variables. So let's make this one comment by double slash, and let's go to top of our class. So for the first thing we need, what we need player position. So let's create a public transform means position we can call, and let's call this one player position, or you can call it something like player. And the second thing we need a need, basically sorry, the first thing it will be current position, and the second thing is this one player position or the target, and the third thing we need our speed. So let's pass public float, and let's call this one something like chase speed. let's call this one chase speed, and by default I'm gonna set it to something like 4f, and normal walk speed I'm gonna set it to a smaller number, something like 1.5f, and I'm gonna set this one chase speed to something like 2.5f. And now what we have to do, let's control s to save our code, and let's move to unity. Basically we have to drag our transform means position to our transform fields in our player. Basically we need our player position, then we can just target it. So just wait for to compile, and we should have a look on that. It will take a few moments, and now it's done. So if we select our giant enemy game object, giant enemy game object, as you can see player, and it says none transform, so we don't have our player transform main position. So let's select this player game object and drag it right there from hierarchy. Now we have player transform, means this player transform means position. So now let's go to our script one more time. So let's remove these two slashes. So the first thing, it will take the current position, so let's pass transform dot position, means the current position of our enemy game object. And the second thing, it will take the target position, so let's pass player dot position. Basically we want to target our player, so that's why we passed player position, and we have our player position reference as well. And the second and the third thing, it will take the speed, so let's pass our chase speed, and make sure you just multiply with that with time dot delta time to make frame rate independence. Now close that off with semicolon, control s to save, and let's move to unity. So once we get inside of that, make sure you just press down control s. Now let's move to unity, it will save your code. So once we get inside of that circle of our enemy game object, then enemy game object will chase us. And what we want to do, we want to speed up the animation. To speed up, we need a animator reference. So as you can see, we have animator, we select this giant enemy, we can see an animator component is added up once we created those animation clip of this enemy game object, like those walk, attack, and death, and hit. So we need a reference of this animator component, then we can speed up the animation. So we need a reference of this. So let's go to our script, and let's go over here on top of our script giant enemy class, let's make it over here. So we need, so make sure you just making that public animator, animator, and let's call this one animator. And make sure you just close that off with semicolon, and you just you need to go to unity, and you have to drag this animator component to that animator field, then we have the reference. So make sure you just do that later on. And let's go to our script now. To speed up the animation, we're gonna go right over here. So we will go to animator done speed, and what we want to speed a little bit fast, so we will set equal to 1 point something like 5f, or you can set it to 2f, so the animation speed will be twice fast. And what we forgot to do, one thing right over here, we have to set this transform dot position equal to this. So transform dot position over here means the current position of our this giant enemy game object, basically this one, and we're setting equal to this vector 2 dot move towards, and we do know this function will take us to that target position. So as the first argument, it will take the current position, as second argument, it will take the target position where we want to go, and the third argument, it will take the speed, how much fast you want to go to that point or to that target point. And once we are not basically once the enemy is not inside this circle, in that situation we need to set this animator dot space, basically the speed of our animation, a normal animation speed. We don't set to it twice fast. So over here, as you can see, we just patrolling around the ground. So at that moment we need to set the speed of our animator as normal. So we're gonna go to animator dot speed, and we will set it to some 1f. Basically this is our normal speed, so let's set equal to 1f, and make sure you just control that, control S to save your code. Now let's move to Unity. So once we get inside of this circle, we should able to see that this enemy game object, this giant enemy, will chase us a little bit faster, and the animation speed will be twice faster. But once we are not inside of this circle, then it will just gonna work on top of this ground. So let's have a look on that. So let's hit this play button in the top and take a look on that. One thing we forgot to do that is that animator, and it says none. So make sure you just drag the reference. We're gonna get some error right now. So as you can see, we getting error because I'm gonna get out of play mode. As you can see, animator, and it says none animator, so we don't have the reference. So what we need to select this animator component of this giant enemy and drag it right there in animator field. Now as you can see, we have giant enemy animator, basically the reference. Now let's have a look. So let's hit this play button. Make sure you just do that, else you're gonna get some error. So in that time we we wasn't have this animator. So now we have reference of this animator component, and let's have a look on that. So as you can see, it just normally walking around, but once we get inside of this, as you can see, it's working a little bit faster, and it just just going closing. But once we get inside or outside of this, you can say, sorry, we're just getting some. Okay, so once we are outside of the circle, as you can see, it's just our enemy just working as normal. But once we get inside of that, so let's have a look. uh, as you can see, it's working twice faster, and it's not looking toward us. So what we need to look toward us. So let's have a look on that. So before we do that, we're gonna do some rest thing that we left. So the thing is that enemy is just getting too much close, and we need to stop this enemy at some point. And in that moment we have to play our attack animation. So we need to do that. So let's go to our script. So we need to stop that. So before we chase or do these things, as you can see, we chasing, we need to check if the distance between them, if it's too much close, then we need to stop our enemy game object to chase us. So to stop, we're gonna use this if dot vector2 dot distance function, and we know that this function will take two position and it will compare between them. So firstly we're gonna pass our own position, which is transform dot position, and the second thing, it will take the target position, player position, basically in which position we want to check, or in which basically uh, compare them, basically in which or what game object we are comparing. So we comparing with our player, so that's why we're gonna pass player dot position. So if the distance between them, as you can see, vector2 dot distance, and this one takes two position, so we pass our own position, which is transform dot position, and the second position we pass player dot position. So we want to check between them. So if the distance between them, if it's greater than some number, something like 3f or some smaller number, so I'm gonna create a variable for that. So let's go to our top of our class right over here. Let's make a something like retrieve distance. So let's public float, make sure you just make that public to adjust through inspector. Let's call that one retrieve, sorry, retrieve 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 distance. If I misspelling, I really apologize for that. Retrieve distance, okay, retrieve will be over here. Okay, so retrieve distance, and by default I'm gonna set it to something like 3f, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon. So if the distance between our player position, okay, player position and enemy position is still greater than this retrieve distance, and make some curly brackets. So the distance between them is still greater than retrieve distance, means player our player position, basically this player is not too much close to this enemy game object yet. So in that situation we're gonna chase, else we're not gonna do. And once the enemy is this giant enemy and player is too much close, something right over here, so in that situation we need to play attack animation instead of chasing. So that's why, so if the distance between, if it's still greater than of this number, basically means the enemy is not too much close yet, so in that moment we need to chase. So that's why we're gonna put this line of code. Control X for cut, and let's paste it over here, control V by pasting. So what we doing, what we're gonna do, we're just chasing, as you can see right over here, we just doing that. But once the enemy position and player position, it's not greater than retrieve distance, means our player is now too much close or enemy game object. So in that situation, so let's type else condition. So in that situation what we have to do, we need to basically attack. So basically we have to trigger this parameter. If we select this giant enemy and go over to animator tab, so what we have to do, we need to trigger this attack parameter. Basically we need to set it to true, and we don't know, and if we set that one to true, it will play attack animation clip right away. So that's the thing. Now let's go to our script. So once the enemy is now too much close, basically enemy and player, so we're gonna play the attack animation clip. So let's go to animator, and that is a bool parameter, so that's why we have to use this set bool function. And the first argument in quotation, it will take the parameter name. So in our case attack, make sure you just spelling it correct. And the second argument, it will take the value, so we're gonna set it to true. And we do know if we set it to true, it will basically that tech animation will be played. And make sure you just close that up with semicolon. And in that moment we want to set our animator speed as normal, or attack animation will be too much fast. So that's why we're gonna go to animator dot speed, and we will set it to normal. Basically 1f means the normal animation speed. And make sure you just close that with semicolon. And we also need to set back this animator parameter false. Once this enemy and this player is not too much close, at that moment we're gonna set this attack parameter to false. And we do know once we set that to false, it will play the walk animation clip or the chase, we do know. So that's why once the enemy and player is not too much close yet, basically it's greater than retrieve distance, that means enemies still have to chase our player game object. So that's why we're gonna go to animator, and we will say we'll use the set bool function. And then in quotation we're gonna pass the parameter name, so in our case attack, and we will set it to false because enemy is not too much close yet. So that's why we need to play walk animation, so we have to set this attack parameter to false. And make sure you just close that up with semicolon and control S to save your code. And now if we move to Unity and have a look on that, we should able to see that change is just gonna happen right away. Once we are too much close this enemy and player, enemy just gonna stop right there, and it will play attack animation because we not doing anything. Once the enemy is too much close, we just setting our animator speed normal, and then we just playing attack animation, as you can see. And after that we're doing nothing at all. So let's go to our script. I'm gonna close this animator tab by just right clicking on it and close tab. I'm gonna bring up the animator tab one more time. So to bring up, let's go to window in the top and scroll down, says animation, and let's bring up this animator. I'm gonna drag it in the bottom now, and let's have a quick look on that. So let's hit this play button in the top, and let's have a look on that. Let's have a look on that. So once we get inside, as you can see, it's staging, but the problem is that we need to choose a bigger number of retrieve distance. So I'm gonna pause the game. So let's click on this pause in the top to pause, and I'm gonna set this retrieve distance something like let's set it to something like 4. Now if I just hit this pause button one more time to play game, as you can see, oh, okay, enemy gates stop right here, and it's just playing attack animation clip over again and again, as you can see. So I hope you get the idea. And once the enemy is too much close, not too much close, as you can see, it just chasing, and once it's get too much close, it's playing attack animation, as you can see. So I hope you get the idea of that. So what we need to do, once the enemy takes damage, it should play take damage thing, but we will take a look on that later. For now, we're gonna take a look on die thing. Or once that so before we die, we need to give some basically, once the enemy loses all of his health, enemy should play that death animation clip. Before we play the death, we need to give some health to this enemy game object. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, and let's have a look on that. So basically, let's open up our enemy script, and let's give some health to our enemy game object. So let's go to top of our class, and let's make a public int I'm gonna call this one max health, and by default, sorry, max health, max max health, and by default I'm gonna give 3 amount of health to this enemy game object. So 3. And now let's make a take damage function anywhere in this script you can. So I'm gonna make it somewhere around here. Make sure you're just making it public, because we want to call this function from another class or script, so that's why. And for function, we're gonna type void, and let's call this function something like take damage, and make first bracket and some curly brackets. So what we want to do inside this function, we want to subtract our some health from this enemy game object once this player game objects just attack or shoot on this player enemy game object, once this player do that thing. So let's do that. To subtract, we're gonna go to max health minus equal 1. So what we basically doing, we have given 3 health, as you can see right over here, to our giant enemy game object. And if we call this function for the first time, this take damage, we do know that giant enemy game object have 3 health. So if we call this function, so this one is 3. So what we're doing inside this, so 3 minus 1 right over here will be 2 now. So the max health will go 2. And if we call this function for the next time, so the max health is now 2, and 2 minus 1 will be 1. So the max health, if we call this take damage for the third time, so max health is now 1. So this max health is 1. So 1 minus 1 will be 0. So somehow our giant enemy game object is gonna lose all of his health. And let's suppose enemy already have 0 health, and if we try to call this function, so this max health is 0. So 0 minus 1 will be minus 1. So it will go to negative value. So before we take damage, we need to check if our health is already 0 or not. So before we subtract, we're gonna check if max health is lesser than or equal to 0, and make some curly brackets. So in that moment, we need to stop basically we need to stop subtracting our max health, because a max health is now already 0. We need to stop doing that. So that's why we're going to type return, and we do know, sorry, not retrieve distance but return. And we do know that after return, whatever line of code you write, it will not be executed. So this will gonna stop right there. So the subtracting max health will stop. So we also need to call this function, but once we loses all of our health, we need to destroy our player game object right away, sorry, enemy game object right away. For that, we're gonna use a die function. So let's go to bottom of our class, You can create anywhere you like, it's totally up to you. So I'm gonna create in bottom, so it doesn't need to be public or private. We're gonna make it instead void, and it's automatically get assigned private. If you don't assign in front of this void anything like public or private, it's automatically get assigned with private. So let's call this function die and make first bracket and some curly brackets. So what we want to do inside this function, we want to for now let's print out a message in the console, something like die. So let's print out twork.log, let's say in quotation die, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon, control s to save your code. And we also need to call this function, but when we lose our all of our health. So let's go to our update function, because this update function will be a perfect time to call, because this update function runs every single frame and we need to keep track of every single frame of our max health enemy game object. So that's why we're gonna go there and we will check right over here. So if max health is lesser than or equal to 0, so in that moment make some curly brackets. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna call this die function. And what die function is doing, it's just printing out the message in the console says die. So let's go to top of our class and let's call this one right over here. So let's call this die and make some close that off with semicolon, and control s to save your code. And we also need to call this take damage function, or else we're not gonna lose any health, and we're not calling anywhere somewhere around here as you can see. So we're gonna call this function through our player script. So let's go to any unity editor now by saving by control s, and we have to do it. And when we're gonna call when this our player game object shoots onto this enemy game object. So let's go to let's open up our player script by double clicking on it, and let's call it over here. As you can see, we're doing it over here. So if hit info basically means if hit info is true, means this once we shoot or click the left mouse button, we're shooting out a ray, and if that ray collide with this enemy game object, then this enemy game object should take damage. Basically we're gonna call that take damage function from this enemy class, and we're shooting it right over here as you can see. So we're gonna check right over here, basically where we shooting out here. So we're gonna type find object of type, just type this and make some these arrows, and we're gonna pass into this arrow the script name. So in our case that giant enemy, and make some brackets, and then there we're gonna call that take damage function. So let's call it dot take damage, and make some curly brackets and close that up with semicolon. So basically what we're doing, we just find an object of type, and into arrows we just pass the script name. So basically we just going over to this giant enemy script, and then we calling this take damage function, and we do know what take damage function is doing. It's just subtracting from our max health by 1 unit every single time once we call this take damage function. Basically we calling this take damage function right there. Now enemy gonna lose his health. So that's the thing. So let's go to our player script and make sure you just control s to save your code. You can call it anywhere you like. So I'm gonna go to our script one more time, and let's have a quick look on that. We should hope that a giant enemy just gonna lose every single time when we shoot. uh, uh, every single time it's gonna lose 1 unit health. You can give any you can just subtract any amount of health you can. So let's have a look on that. So let's hit this play button in the top, and let's take a look on that. So just have a look on that. And now if we get closer to our enemy, so sorry, I'm gonna select the giant enemy game object first. As you can see, by default we have given 3 unit health, sorry, 3 unit health as you can see. And what we want to do now, we're gonna shoot on to this enemy game object. One, two, sorry, okay, sorry, we have not. So reduce distance we're gonna give 4, and what we have to do, we need to assign this giant enemy as a enemy layer. So that's why this enemy game object or this giant enemy not taking damage. So in order to do that, so let's select this giant enemy. Let's go to inspector. In the top right you can see layer, so I'm gonna assign with this enemy. So now this game object, now if we hit this play button in the top right now, and this enemy or giant enemy game object just gonna lose his health while we are shooting on this enemy game object. So let's have a look, or let's take a look. Let's see. Shoot, just wait. And now if we, as you can see, a max health becomes 2, and if we just shoot a second time, as you can see it's became 1, and if we shoot one more time it's gonna lose all of his health. And if we select this console, as you can see that die function just calling over again and again, because we did inside update function. So that's why die message just printing out again and again and again. So I'm gonna unplay this. So instead of printing out message, what we want to destroy this player game object. So before we destroy, what we're gonna do, we're gonna play the death animation of this giant enemy. So basically we need to trigger this damage parameter right over here. And if we select this giant enemy and move to animation tabs and select this death animation of as you can see, after 1 second 1.1, you can say we just completing our whole animation clip. So that's why after this amount of time we're gonna destroy this game object. Before we gonna play before we destroy, we're gonna play the animation clip, and the animation clip is just completing after 1.1 second. And after that amount of time we're gonna destroy this giant enemy game object right away. So let's go to our script and basically our giant enemy. So let's open up our giant enemy script, and in the bottom we just printing out message. So I'm gonna leave that, and after printing out message we're gonna play the animation. So we have a animator reference, so let's go to animator dot set trigger. We have to use this function, it's called set trigger, and into quotation we have to pass the parameter name. So if we move to unity, select this giant enemy, go over to animator tab. So the parameter name, which is death, as you can see, so in quotation we have to pass the same name as we did right over here. So let's do that. So in quotation we're gonna pass death, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon. So after playing death animation clip, we need to destroy our enemy game object right away. So destroy, we're gonna use this destroy function. So first thing, it will take the game object we want to destroy, so we're gonna destroy itself. So we're gonna pass this dot game object, means it just referencing its whole self, basically this giant enemy game object itself, this game object itself, whole game object basically. And the second thing, we can specify the time. So we do know we completing our animation clip after 1.1 second completely. So after that amount of time we want to destroy, so that's why we're gonna pass 1.1 f, or you can pass 1.01 f. You can pass, and make sure you just close that up with semicolon. So after this amount of time, the game object or the enemy giant game object will destroy right away after this amount of time. And control S to save our code. Now let's move to unity and let's have a look on that. Just wait for to compile. And now I'm going to select this giant enemy. Let's go to animation tab. Okay, so it's fine now. So I'm going to clear the console. Let's hit this play button in the top. So once this enemy game object loses all of his health, so this max health gonna be 0, and once it's become 0, we calling the die function, and we do know what die function is doing. It's just printing out message and then playing that death animation clip, and after it just dying or destroying. So let's do that. 1 2 3, as you can see, it played the die animation clip or death, and after that it just get destroyed from our scene. So I hope you get the idea. And the problem is that it just play it instantly or some weirdly. So we're gonna select our enemy game object one more time, and let's go to animator. And over here, if we select this arrow, we're gonna untick this has exit time. Now if we play one more time, sorry, we need to check that, we need to check that. So just leave that, check that. Now it's fine, basically it's fine, you can play around with it and you're gonna get hang of it. And one thing we notice that if we hit this play button, wherever something like player is in the left side and the enemy just going into the right side, so enemy is not flipping in the direction player is looking, we need to flip that. So flip that. So have a look on that. So as you can see, we're looking right, and if we just move to the right side, enemy is not looking to the right direction. As you can see, it just looking to the left side, and it just playing the attack animation clip in that direction. So what we need to flip this enemy game object to the right side according to our player position, where if the player in the right direction, that means we need to flip our enemy game object to that direction. So that's why. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, let's get out of play mode, and let's go to our script. So over here, as so if we open up, so over here, as you can see, we just doing the attack, basically we just chasing and attacking. So if before we chase or attack, basically over here, if call info is true, basically means the player inside of that circle. So what we need to flip this enemy game object in the direction player is going, wherever the player is. So we're gonna check right over here if we have player reference, we do know. So we're going to check if player dot position dot x, if it's greater than transform dot position dot x. So if that is the case, and make some curly brackets. So basically what we're doing, we just doing, if I take my player game object and select this move tool and move it somewhere around here, and I'm gonna take giant enemy, let's move it somewhere around here. So as you can see, player position in the x-axis will be greater than enemy position in the x-axis. As you can see, we're checking right over here, if the player position in the x-axis, if it's greater than enemy position in the x-axis. So in that situation, as you can see, player position will be greater than and greater than our enemy position in the x-axis, basically horizontally, as you can see. So in this moment, what we need to flip this enemy game object to the right direction. Basically we have to set 1 minus 180, sorry, not this player. If we select this giant enemy, and we can set it to something like minus 180, as you can see, it will look in the right direction. And after flipping in the right direction, what we're gonna do, we're gonna set that facing left parameter to false. Why? Because we're looking to the right direction, as you can see. So that's why. So I'm gonna set back to 0, and let's do that thing. So I'm gonna take my player game object, let's move it over here. And second argument, we also gonna check if the enemy is looking left direction, so we need to flip in the right direction. We're gonna check if facing left is equals to true. Firstly we're checking if the player position in the x-axis, if it's greater than enemy position in the x-axis, means player is somewhere around here. And if the enemy is looking to the left direction, we're checking both of those statements. So in that moment, we need to flip this enemy game object to the right direction. So that's why we're gonna go to transform dot Euler angles, and we will set equal to new vector 3, because this transform dot Euler angles is a 3-dimensional data which has x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis. So that's why we're just setting equal to new vector 3, because this vector 3 also a 3-dimensional data. So we're just going over to Euler angles. So in the y, we do know if we set this one to minus 180 half, it will look to the right, basically right direction, right direction. And we're gonna put in the z 0, in the x we're gonna do the same thing. So after flipping this this giant enemy to the right direction, we're gonna set this facing left to false. Why? Because we're gonna look in the right direction, so that's why. So we're gonna set that facing left parameter to false now, false now. Else if and we're gonna check else if player position, okay, player dot position dot x, sorry, x, if it's lesser than transform dot position dot x, and we are, and if the enemy is looking, facing left equals to false, make some curly brackets. So what we doing basically right over here, we checking if the player position now, okay, if the player position something like player is right over here, so the player position in the x axis will be lesser than enemy position, basically transform dot position dot x will be lesser than, basically enemy is something right over here. And if sorry, if the player is right over here, because the player position in the x will be lesser than enemy position in the x axis, as you can see. So the player is right over here, and if this enemy is looking right direction, so in that moment what we have to do, we need to flip this character or this enemy game object to the left direction. As you can see, we need to flip that, and we need to set that facing left parameter, this facing left parameter to true one more time, because enemy is right over here and we will look to the left direction. So that's why we set this, we're gonna set this facing left parameter to false. Basically we're checking if we right over here and enemy is right over here and enemy is looking right direction, so that's why we're gonna flip to the left direction one more time. So let's copy this line of code, so control C, and let's paste it over here by control V. So first thing, we're gonna set back to 0, and if we set this 1 to 0, it will look to the left direction, as you can see. And that's why we're gonna set this facing left parameter one more time to true, because it's gonna look to the left direction. So control S to save your code. Now let's move to Unity and let's have a quick look on that. So just wait for to compile, and once it's done, you will able to see that. So now, sorry, and now if we hit this play button in the top and have a look on that, we should able to see it's gonna work out okay. Once the enemy sorry, player is right over here, enemy will look in the direction player is going. So let's have a quick look on that, and let's do that. So as you can see, indeed enemy gets flips, and we are over here. As you can see, enemy gets flip in the direction player is going, as you can see. I hope you get the idea of this. And once we out of our attack range, we can see enemy just patrolling around the ground. So I hope you get the idea of this. And if you want to make the attack one, basically this player game object should take damage. I have a lot of videos. I will put a link in the description, you can go and check that out, and it's gonna work out okay and fine. So I hope you get the idea of this. And lastly, thanks for watching this video. Okay, goodbye. I will see you in the next tutorial. For now, goodbye.